Politics, cultural exchange, social life and ecological issues. These are only few areas where international organizations implement their projects. They cooperate with public and private partners, and preserving peace for future generation is their principal goal. How do they arrange their work? What role is given to Kazakhstani initiatives? You'll find more on this in Kazakhstan International Vectors.
Unfortunately, every day in the world we are producing more refugees due to unsolved conflicts.
I would say that the main activity that UNHCR is conducting in the world is ensuring access to protection of refugees who are compelled to cross international borders.
In the Middle Ages, churches in Europe played the role of asylums. All the victims of military conflicts and natural disasters came there in search of protection. There was also another category of people, criminals, who took refuge for capital punishment within the walls of temples. Church officers handed them over only to civil judges on the condition that they would not be executed. However, in 1624, one of French monarchs abolished the church's right for granting shelter to such people. The year 1951, Switzerland, a huge flow of displaced people from Europe and Africa compelled the UN General Assembly to take proper actions focused on the prevention of international conflicts. To settle this issue, the convention relating to the status of refugees was adopted in Geneva. The document sets out common rules for accepting of such migrants and prohibits any discrimination towards them. Modern times, a ferry suffers a wreck on the White Nile River in southern Sudan. It carried about 300 refugees fled from Malakal city, seized with military actions and ethnic conflicts. Neglecting the safety rules and overcrowding were announced as the main reasons of tragedy. The world community has been dealing with the issues of refugees for several decades. The core problem lies in the local population, which is not optimistic about new neighbors, experts say. International organizations constantly remind us about the necessity to observe the rights of refugees and never differentiate them with respect to sex, religion, race, or any other criteria. They also defend the rights of anyone who was forced to leave a home. Military conflicts, poverty and droughts annually displace thousands of people and turn them into refugees. Last year, their number all over the world bet a new record by reaching more than 46 million people. The majority is seeking asylums in Europe and in the US. The so-called detention centers for foreign nationals in these regions were overcrowded. As a result, the countries tried to limit the inflow of refugees. So how do international organizations pursue the rights of refugees, and why stopping their flow is impossible yet? The American Geographical Society conducted a survey and concluded that New Zealand could be the most attractive country for refugees. It has a favorable climate, well-arranged social defense system and low unemployment level. Nevertheless, it is very difficult to become a resident of this country. Entrants are placed into filtration camps until the decision on granting them the refugee status is taken. Experts' observations show that refugees seek asylums mainly in neighboring countries. Thus, for example, displaced Afghan citizens usually move to Central Asian countries. Last year, there were more than 2.5 million of them. The quantity of refugees in Kazakhstan has already reached 600 people. State authorities and various organizations, including the Bureau for Refugees, address their issue. Lawyer Gulmira Kuatbekova has been helping displaced people already for 6 years. Our organization is a partner of the UN High Commissioner. We render legal assistance to asylum seekers and refugees on the territory of Kazakhstan. The absence of documentation, bureaucratic hurdles and many other things turn into a number of problems in obtaining a proper status in many countries, including Kazakhstan, Gulmira says. We know very well that asylum seekers can live in the territory of Kazakhstan without any documents, but proving the fact that they will face any type of discrimination before the court is very difficult. The influx of refugees significantly affect a country's economy. For instance, an inflow of Syrian migrants in Turkey provoked the increase of unemployment and unrest on the boundary between the two states. Some international organizations, including the UN Office for Refugees, have embarked on solving this problem. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is an international organization which specializes in defending the rights and well-being of people who left their native lands due to exceptional circumstances. It was established by the UN General Assembly in 1950. Its headquarters is located in Geneva, Switzerland. The organization consists of 126 member countries. Annually, more than 7,500 of the organization's employees help millions of refugees. Based on the latest figures presented by the experts, every 4 seconds, one displaced person appears in the world.
So altogether, there are almost 4 million Syrians who have fled the conflict in Syria to the neighboring countries. This is a huge humanitarian disaster.
The influx of refugees is not the problem of only one country. Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq and Egypt are the main states which proposed shelters to Syrian refugees. However, this assistance will be insufficient for all the people in need, warned the organization's representatives. According to the most recent data, the number of registered refugees in Turkey exceeds 1.5 million people, in Lebanon more than 1 million, in Jordan slightly more than 600,000, in Iraq 235,000 and in Egypt 140,000.
I can give you a very concrete example. Lebanon, for example. Lebanon is a country which is its population, its local population is 4 million people and currently is hosting nearly 1,200,000 refugees. So it means that more than 25% of the persons who are living in Lebanon right now are refugees, Syrian refugees concretely.
Along with Syria, the number of refugees is also growing in the Middle East and African countries, and experts are concerned by the fact that in future the majority of displaced people won't return to their native countries.
We have Afghanistan, and Afghanistan has also been, over a long number of years, producing refugees. Altogether, there are about 2.5 million refugees who have fled Afghanistan and who are still outside of their country.
The organization implements its activities via governmental agencies of countries. However, in order to make its work more efficient, UNHCR also cooperates with other international organizations.
And UNHCR is working very closely with the governments in the region and also with other UN agencies, with non-governmental organizations, with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement, to try to provide protection and assistance to these people who are fleeing.
Much attention is given to women and children. These are the most vulnerable categories of displaced people. According to UNICEF, more than 2.5 million of underage refugees have now possibility to visit schools. Because of that, providing access to basic services in host states is one of the organization's principal tasks. The first attempts to regulate the flow of refugees were taken as early as in times of the World War I, when 1.5 million people had left their homes and moved to European and Asian countries. The role of the supervising authority was taken by the League of Nations, which appointed the first Commissioner for Refugees, researcher Fridtjof Nansen. He developed the first travel documents for the displaced people, which were later named Nansen passports. After the World War II, a new authority, the Office of High Commissioner for Refugees, was established.
Well, when UNHCR was created in 1950, it was after the Second World War, where there were millions of refugees and displaced persons.
Later, the problem of refugees spread far beyond Europe. The organization started to expand the geography of its cooperation. The revolution in Hungary, decolonization of the African continent, along with other political and military events, resulted in increasing the association's staff from 34 people to several hundreds.
So the initial idea of setting up the organization was that it would last only for 5 years and then it would no longer be needed. Unfortunately, since then, throughout the decades, there have been conflicts all over the world, and these conflicts have continued to produce refugees.
The organization's main task for today is to improve legislations of countries towards displaced people. Thus, in 2010, a law which allows people to acquire a temporary place of residence has entered into force in Kazakhstan.
There are still challenges, no? And one of the biggest challenges is that we have to still do a lot of work together with the government in improving the situation of refugees in Kazakhstan. Particularly, as I mentioned, access to health services, but also access to livelihoods and possibilities of integration in general. As I mentioned, 632 refugees could be, if there is the willingness to do so, they could be easily integrated in Kazakhstan, and they could become very productive members of the Kazakh society.
Along with refugees, the organization also helps stateless persons. For the last 3 years, their number all over the world has increased 4 times and reached 12 million. The majority of them live in European countries and in the US. This situation has already been characterized as the problem of the 21st century.
And in this region of Central Asia, it's estimated there are probably around 87,000 such people. And we are working with the governments in the region to try to help solve this problem of statelessness.
The UNHCR projects are financed owing to voluntary contributions. The organization announces tender for so-called concept applications from countries and international non-governmental organizations.
So we are always short of money. We have to do what we call prioritization of activities, which means that when we plan all the activities that are necessary, all the programs, assistance programs that are necessary around the world.
The organization also launches information campaigns jointly with state authorities. In such a way, they encourage refugees and stateless persons to apply for assistance and legalize their status.
Maybe not with a very aggressive information campaign, with more with reach-out visits to rural areas all around Kazakhstan, because we think that there might be persons in this situation in rural areas who are not even aware that they can be assisted to resolve their problem of statelessness or risk of statelessness.
During 64 years of work, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees helped more than 50 million displaced people. At the same time, the organization's administration is confident that cooperation with governments will have a stronger effect. The history knows quite a lot of cases when commissions of certain states resulted in catastrophic consequences. As an example, experts tell about Lampedusa Island. In 2011, after the revolution in Tunisia and civil war in Libya, thousands of people arrived there. Several months later, the number of refugees there exceeded the number of local residents. The humanitarian catastrophe was aggravated by the mass unrest. Alleviating this chaos was possible only by means of naval ships and helicopters. If not for the leading world organizations which help refugees, a major humanitarian collapse would be unavoidable, and most probably the majority of these people would be killed. European architects invented a way of how to construct a cheap house of high quality. The structure consists mainly of waste paper panels. Its developers are confident that their idea will be very helpful in areas where temporary housing has become an urgent need. The price of such paper houses is $5,000.